Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Inside IRT's admissions process webinar series. Tonight, we are on the second of that series, and our topic for discussion is the application essays. I am Brittany Zorn, the Arts and Sciences Program Specialist here with the IRT, going on my 7th year as a staff person and a proud IRT alumna from the class of 2013. I'm joined by my colleague Leslie this evening. Leslie, would you like to introduce yourself?
Definitely. Good evening, everyone. I'm Leslie Godo Solo. I'm the Education Program Specialist here at the IRT. This is my 21st year with the organization. I'm also an IRT alum, class of 1991. And we're so excited that you have joined us this evening on what I'm sure is a busy day. So thank you for your time and for participating.
Definitely. Okay, so for tonight's webinar, we are going to talk all about the essays, which are a required portion of the IRT application. It's probably worth it to say, for the sake of the recording and anyone who's joining for the first time, if you did not watch last week's webinar, which was the first webinar in this Inside IRT's admissions process series, you should certainly go back and watch the overview webinar, which talks about our admissions process in the broad view. And the presentation was recorded and is available on IRT's YouTube page. Okay, shameless pitches aside, this is an overview of tonight's webinar. And you'll see we'll just get into the specifics of the application, the essays required with the application.
Okay, so we skipped, okay, we did the overview. All right. So then in terms of fields that we work with, you will see a list here on this slide of the various arts and sciences programs and humanities programs that we work with, and also education fields that we have supported students with. Hopefully the field that you're interested, you find here. I should mention that unfortunately, we do not work with students who want to pursue masters in social work. We don't have agreements with those types of programs. That's a whole different school from an education or the humanities, social sciences divisions. But if you don't see your field here and you're curious, feel free to put it in the chat or to put it in, and if you want to just do, send it directly to me and Brittany or to one of us, if you're not comfortable putting it right in the chat where everyone can see it. But yes, these are typically the fields. We do math. We do not work with science majors unless you are planning to teach a science at the secondary level. But if you're looking to pursue science as a master's or a PhD, that's not our program. We can suggest some others for you. But everybody I've seen here, ethnic studies, we definitely support.
Oh, great.
I'm looking through the list. Gender and women's studies, we definitely support. Native studies, American studies. What I would say about some of these programs, such as the Native studies, the women and gender studies, we only have a good 7 to 9 of those programs. So for those individuals, you may also want to look at schools outside of our consortium to apply to as well. The American Studies, tons of programs in our consortium for American Studies. And those are the ones that I see listed here. Okay, so yes, so if you want to talk about, what you want to pursue and you don't see it on this list, again, you can put it in the chat or you can reach out to Brittany and I via email.
Exactly right. The only thing I want to just reiterate on this slide is that in the IRT application, you will respond to a set of essay questions based on which grouping of your field falls into. So what you see here, we have the two groups, arts and social sciences and education. The reason we have it broken down in this way is because depending on where your desired graduate school field fits, if it's an education program or in arts and social science, you'll respond to that specific set of essay questions in the IRT application.
You want to talk about if they're interested in both?
Oh, sure, go
Oh,
for it.
here we are. It's on that. It's on the next slide.
Oh, look, you always getting ahead.
Yeah, I know. We just so if there's ever an instance when an applicant should respond to both sets of questions, and the answer is yes. If you are torn between a field in the arts and humanities and education. So let's say, for example, you are an English major, you're interested in a master's/PhD in English literature. At the same time, you are also interested in an MAT, which is the Masters of Arts in Teaching, which will give you certification to teach at the high school level. In that instance, you would write or respond to both sets of essays. So the ones for the English, the questions that we ask for folks in the arts and humanities or social sciences, humanities, and then also you would answer the education questions, okay? If you are in one of those areas, but let's say you're in the area of education, but you're looking at like 2 or 3 different areas, write the education essays with the one that you would pick as number 1 right now, and then also elaborate to say you're also thinking about this field because of you can do certain methodologies, or you can, because of such and such theorists or theorists who you're interested in and would inform the way that you go about teaching this material. That would be the best way to proceed and the same thing if you were in the humanities, social sciences, and you're looking at women and gender studies and say American studies. Okay. Yeah, write your essays as if you were looking at both of those.
Excellent.
Is there anything that I missed on that sheet? Because I didn't. Do you apply? We asked the question, what field does your graduate program of interest for which you can, select? What if my field could fall in either? So we've dealt with that. Choose one set of essays. Okay, which questions allowed? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
That's articulate. Yeah, so I think what we're getting at there is that sometimes it's really a matter, a student is torn because they haven't done enough research to know where the ideal fit is. Okay. So if you're struggling with that, I would say that, a conversation with Brittany or I may be very useful, because you want to deal with that sooner rather than later. Because what happens is that we have students that go through the program and they get through applying, and then they realize that the field they were applying to was actually not the best fit, but they don't discover that until they're like in the midst of it, and they're researching, and they're already invested in doing that, and then they get to the end and they get in but they don't have funding, or other things happen, like situations in your family. Because we just had a student who got through like all of writing his statements of purpose, and then at the end realized that he does not really want to teach at a college level. So he didn't actually submit anything. He's decided to pursue his licensed social work undergraduate degree and then actually work for a couple of years. and not go right on to graduate school. So all those kinds of things can happen. And I would say the best thing is to chat with us, because we can help direct you on that, and avoid those kinds of pitfalls and time invested situations where it doesn't get you where you really want to be.
The summary is, if you're not sure, reach out.
Yes.
Okay, so what are the criteria that dictate a strong or determine a strong essay in the IRT application? So now you know which set of essays you're going to respond to. You've identified your prospective field. What else should you be prepared for? There are word limits for each set of essays, and they're pretty short intentionally. So if you sit down to write these essays and you're not struggling against the word limit, you probably haven't realized how short it is. The questions are sometimes multi-pronged questions. They have, multiple elements that we're asking you to address. And so you want to be scrutinous and make sure that you are answering all elements of the prompt within those word limits. You will be asked to type directly into a text box in the application. So you might draft your essay responses in a Word document or in a Google Doc. The essay questions are already available on the IRT website, which we'll show you in a moment. Or maybe you already know this because you've been poking around on the IRT website already. So you could take the essay questions and start working on your essay responses now, and just, free writing and putting some thoughts down, and maybe getting even like a second or third opinion from a friend or a mentor, like on your draft, before you actually go and copy and paste into the IRT application directly for submission. And then for the set of questions you're not going to answer in the application, I think all of the questions are required. So the application won't allow you to fully save or submit this page, the essay page, or I think they're called pages or tabs in the application, unless you put NA or something in the boxes. And so just putting something in there, not applicable, or see next set of questions, or responded to arts and sciences questions, something like this, will just allow you to save your progress and actually submit the application. I guess I can continue since it's still evaluation criteria, since we're still in the criteria realm.
Sounds good.
Cool. So if you watched the first webinar recording in this series, or if you attended live, you know that we evaluate across a rubric, and essays are just one of the categories, one of the 4 categories that we evaluate you across in your application. And we evaluate each category on a scale of 1 to 5. So we're going to tell you what makes a 5 essay, a top scored, perfect, the highest score you can get on an essay in the IRT application review rubric. Your essays are well thought out, relevant, and exceptionally written. Okay, maybe this is a given. But what we mean by this is that there is clear structure to your essay. So you have a topic sentence that reiterates the question or the topic at hand. You have your content body sentences that provide all the detail that we need to know. And you have a concluding sentence which summarizes your short paragraph or your short essay. We want to see that the response to the essay is all, the information contained is all relevant, directly addressing the prompt. That's why we have such a small word limit, because it forces you to leave all of the erroneous, fluffy stuff out and only get to the meat and potatoes, or to the tofu of your essay response. And then exceptionally written doesn't mean that it needs to be dense or overly verbose or wordy. It just means that it's clear, there's no typos or errors, and each sentence flows nicely with the one before and after it. We're also reading for your mission match with IRT. And so again, if you watched the first webinar in this series, we talked about IRT's mission and values around addressing issues of diversity, equity, access, and justice in education. And we're looking for a demonstration of those values through your essay responses. We're also looking for an essay that suggests competitiveness for graduate study and, presents the assumption that you would be able to write a strong statement of purpose. In fact, your essay questions are probably going to serve as or your essay responses are probably going to serve as the foundation for your statement of purpose. Whether you participate in IRT or not, whether you're admitted to IRT or not, the questions we ask you for the essays are very intentionally addressing the same topics that you would need to articulate in a statement of purpose for your graduate program. And so we're not trying to make you work harder unnecessarily. In fact, we're trying to save you by getting you to think about the things that a statement of purpose will ask of you now in the IRT application process. So again, we want to see that students are being thoughtful, critical, and thorough in their responses. Excuse me. That your essay demonstrates critical thinking, analysis, synthesis, ability to draw connections, that your career goals or academic and career goals are clearly stated so that you have a relatively strong and clear vision of where you're headed, what your future directions are, why this graduate degree is the next step on the path to achieving whatever goal, whatever long-term goal you have. And then just generally that your essays make sense, that there are no typos, that you've used correct grammar, that sort of thing. So copy editors, proofreaders, get your friends to proofread your essays, start early, write multiple drafts, don't sit down the night before and try to write it all out in one fell swoop. Take some time to let yourself chew on these questions, ruminate on them, and really refine a draft or an essay as you go. Maybe your first draft is 500 words. And then over a couple of weeks and revisions, you're tailoring it down to the 150 to 250 range that we're requiring. That's probably a more effective strategy than trying to just write it, start to finish.
All right. So for those of you who are in the arts and social sciences, humanities fields, Essay 1 will ask you to write a brief essay describing 3 texts within your intended graduate discipline that are impactful to your understanding of social justice and diversity advocacy. And so these are 3, if you're in women and gender studies, what are 3 texts that you've read that influence and impact the research that you want to conduct when you go to graduate school. And one of those must be a canonical. So that means a group of literary works that are generally accepted in your field. And at least 2 should be based in critical theory. So we're looking for, not like a more than just a, say an article. This should be someone who's known in your field that you've studied or that you want to study. And you want to cite those 3 sources in the appropriate text boxes below. And we give you 150 words per citation. Anything else I can add to that, Brittany?
No, I think we get questions about this every year. People email us or write in and say, oh, is this text canonical, or would these texts apply? And I think the only thing I could say to get in front of that is, generally speaking, what we want to see in your description of the text is that you've made a connection to why this text is foundational to your field, or how it's influenced your understanding and how you've applied that understanding to either your scholarship or your practical work. So it says, must be canonical, must be based in critical theory, but we're pretty flexible in what determines something being canonical or what determines something being based in critical theory. If you're trying to be an elementary school teacher, maybe it's a picture book, or something that has a great representation of, a diverse kind of student that isn't widely represented. And, you've used that book to facilitate really impactful discussions with your students, and maybe the picture book itself isn't based in critical theory per se, but maybe you can make a connection saying like this particular book has allowed me to deliver a culturally inclusive experience to my classroom, and that's the connection that you're able to make. So it really is about synthesis here more than, you know, applying these terms. We did get a question in the chat.
Okay.
Can it be a text that discusses the different methodologies in the field you're interested in? So I'm thinking something more like, it's more like a textbook or, you know, style where it's providing, yeah, like an overview of the methodologies that a field uses. I suppose, yeah, if it's been particularly influential to the way that you engage with your field, like if, especially if it was a text that was proposing methodologies that were new or that were challenging traditional methodologies somehow in the discipline, you know, saying that certain traditional methodologies didn't go far enough to be equitable in their assessment of participants or something like that. I think that could definitely be appropriate. Yes.
Mhm.
Cool. Keep the questions coming if as you have them, if you have them.
So for essay 2, you want to explain how and why the study of your intended discipline has been personally meaningful in regards to your academic experience. So what excites you about the field that you are thinking you want to pursue? What kind of problems, issues, concerns do you hope to address? Um, is it that you want to give voice to um, an individual or a topic that has not been that has not really had a lot of light shined upon it? Um, yeah, was there something in your personal life that happened that has led you, to see this particular field as important? Um, that's kind of where you want to go with that essay.
Mhm.
Okay. Um,
Great.
yeah.
Okay. And the third essay for arts and sciences applicants is multi-part, as you can see here, but we've given you 150 words for each part. So the first part of this question is, please describe your current research interests in the specific schools of critical thought within your discipline that inform your approach and research methodology. So this is a very technical question, but if you're pursuing a PhD in a arts or social sciences field, this will be something that you will be very glad you've already written out and thought about when it comes time to write your statement of purpose. And then specifically for social science applicants, so this is sociology, anthropology, most of the studies programs, I think, well, humanity, they're kind of borderline humanities. I guess it would depend on the fields. Like if you're going into American studies, you know, that's a field that usually draws on English and history and culture studies and sociology. So that, you know, potentially depending on what your focus is, could apply to the social sciences applicants question here. So if you're pursuing a PhD, especially in a social science, but even if you're pursuing a master's, you're going to be expected or plan to produce a thesis, right? To produce a major piece of scholarship in that program. That's what this question is getting you to think about as well. Yeah, oh, current project, sorry, current project. My screen was blocked by the videos that you all, by the Zoom videos. So this question is asking you to ruminate on a project you've already done within your discipline, excuse me. And then part B, if you are pursuing an MFA specifically, this is a unique field and no other field really, you know, asks about your particular craft. So if you are pursuing an MFA, we would ask you to also address what elements of your craft do you wish to build upon through graduate study.
Yeah.
I know I fumbled a little bit, so any clarity needed here?
I would say that this this essay in particular you will see again. And in fact, it is your statement of purpose that we will be helping you build out. So beginning to articulate what you want to do succinctly here for us in 150 words, but we're then going to expand upon that in your statement of purpose. But you might think of this as kind of your elevator pitch
Mhm,
for the research that you want to do.
definitely. And your final essay, as required for social science, arts and social sciences applicants, is to describe your future research project that you hope to carry out. So this is what I was meaning when I said, if you're pursuing a master's or a PhD in a social science field, you're most likely going to be producing a thesis or a dissertation. And this is the question that really gets you to articulate that. So I think probably to build off Leslie's last comment, between essay 3 and 4, that's like 90% of your statement of purpose. This is who I am. This is, where my academic foundations come from. This
Mhm.
is a sample of the work that I've done, which has led me to want to pursue this idea in this topic. And I want to do it at your school. That's your statement of purpose. And so, again, we are intentionally asking you to do a difficult task of succinctly articulating these nuanced and multi-part questions now, so that your life is a little bit nicer in the fall when you actually need to submit these things to graduate schools.
Okay. For our education majors, we'd like you to describe your graduate degree or describe the graduate degree that you're seeking, why you want to pursue that degree, and your short and long-term goals. So your short-term goals could be that upon graduation with this degree, I would like to teach um, middle school students, history, for example. And longer term, I hope to become a principal and pursue a PhD. So that's what we're looking for. What field, what degree, why you want to do that. Maybe it was a situation where you felt that you were not supported in high school, and now you want to reach back and assist high school students. Or again, with the middle school example, that's a hard time. I wouldn't want to be a middle schooler ever again. And it's also a very pivotal time when young people are determining who they are, and they're moving from, being childlike into being more less childlike and more serious and responsible as high school students. So it's a very pivotal age, and bless those who can work with that age group is all I say.
Yeah, thank you for your service. Okay, essay 2 for education applicants. Explain how and why graduate study in your area of specialization, whether that's teacher education, school counseling, higher ed administration, educational psychology, and so forth, will be personally meaningful and additive to your previous work as an educator and scholar. The key here is, how will your graduate degree be personally meaningful and additive to your previous work? So why is this graduate degree the next natural step for you? How is it going to advance your career? How are you going to gain skills or knowledge that will allow you to be better in the role that you occupy? How will this additional study and training, allow you to have a greater impact? Something like this. All right, that felt really straightforward. Okay.
Yeah. In essay 3, we're asking you to describe a professional or volunteer experience in education that you've had, and how that experience relates to or fosters your pursuit of graduate study in your area of specialization. So many of you, it sounds like all of you, at least based on those who wrote, are in school. So you'll be looking at typically volunteer experiences. Professional, we mean beyond college.
Mhm.
And so what volunteer experiences, teaching experiences, tutoring experiences have you had that now inform what you want to do in graduate school? Okay. Um, so perhaps you've been working in a after school program and you've noticed that students really don't have a good grounding in history, and you love that and you want to teach that, and not from the standpoint of it just being tons of facts and memorization, but you really want to think critically about what's happening in history and how certain things are repeated, and really have students walk away loving their history class as opposed to hating it. So that might be an example of the connection there. For doctoral students in education, you're going to answer this additional, not our master's candidates. So describe a future research project in your intended graduate discipline that you would like to investigate,
Mhm.
including the project rationale, theoretical frameworks, and the methodological approaches that you plan to interrogate. And so here we're asking you in a nutshell to talk about a possible project that you would do as a PhD candidate.
Yeah, the
And
only
this might, I mean, and this can be what you actually want to do. And if you don't know exactly, then you want to, create something. What we're going to be looking for is, could you carry that project out? Is it feasible? Not too big, tailored narrowly enough so that you could actually accomplish it.
Yeah. The only thing I would highlight here is most of our applicants in education are pursuing master's degrees, which is why this, sub part of the question is saying specifically for doctoral students in education, because as I referenced in the previous set of questions, if you're pursuing a PhD, you're likely to you're going to have to produce a dissertation, right? Like that's a big part of how you get your degree is you produce this massive project. And so many of the essay questions for education applicants are focused on your practical experience and goals, professional goals, because oftentimes students are seeking a master's degree that will give them some sort of credential or um, you know some sort of expertise in a vocation, like in a very specific, because they want to apply their graduate degree to a job. But the only exception to that, and not that you can't pursue a PhD in education and also have career goals, right? Of course you can. But the difference is that for the PhD in education folks, like it's very important that you have a handle on a research project and the scholarship and the critical theory and the canon within your particular area of specialization. So the other questions are more about your experience and your goals and the impact that you want to have. This subpart A is like very specifically about the scholarship with intention. Oh, and then this is the bibliography question that we discussed in essay 1 for the arts and sciences applicants. Here it is essay 4 for the education applicants. Again, kind of building off what I was just saying, that typically folks who are pursuing degrees in education have very clear career goals and are interested in immediately going into a particular job, into the classroom, into an educational institution, into a space where they're influencing policy. And so the emphasis on scholarship is maybe not as pronounced as it is in the arts and sciences, but it's still important. And that's why we're asking about it here, especially if you're pursuing a PhD in education, or if you have an intent to eventually go on to a PhD in education. Same breakdown as the bibliography question for the arts and sciences folks. 1 text that's canonical, 2 that are based in critical theory, but your interpretation of canonical and based in critical theory can be broad as long as you're making good synthesis in your essay, in your citations. Again, feel free to drop any questions in the chat or raise your hand and unmute yourself if you have a question as we go.
So things that you can be working on currently, as you begin to think about these questions, and definitely jot down ideas that you may have. For our doctoral level candidates, you want to hone your research question and agenda. So what is it that you want to research? And if you do not have a whole lot of research experience, you also want to seek out some opportunities to do that. So some of you may belong to the Mellon program or to McNair or to Leadership Alliance. All of these are programs that prepare students for the PhD. In the case of Leadership Alliance, they also prepare students for master's degrees. But they're all organizations where you get some research background. For our master's level candidates, reflect on your most significant and meaningful previous experiences. As I mentioned, they can be teaching, tutoring, working for an after-school program, working for a nonprofit program, for example. Let's say maybe you help students apply to college and you want to go into higher education. You can talk about that experience. Okay, I'm just looking at our fields again. Yeah, so the majority of you are humanities, social sciences. So you're going to be at the doctoral level. Most of you, not always. Some students will do the master's first and then go on to the PhD. We can tell you that the funding is greater at the PhD level. So we typically advise students to apply to the master's PhD. And then usually they can, they get into a number of PhD programs and they also get into masters, and then they realize that the funding is greater at the PhD level. So then there's a conversation about, are you ready, to do this kind of in one swoop, as opposed to say doing a master's 2 years and then perhaps working a year or two and then going back to the PhD. Mm-hmm. And then all candidates should take advantage of any resources that you have on your campus. So the Writing Center on campus, if your professors, if you have friends or a graduate student, mm-hmm. Take advantage of them looking at your essays to give you some feedback before you actually submit them to IRT.
Okay. And that pretty much concludes the content for today's webinar, the overview of the essays. This slide will show at the end of all 4 of the Inside IRT's admissions process webinars to just remind you where you can get all of the information and start an application. So if you have not yet viewed the generic IRT info session recording, there is a video available on the IRT's YouTube page. There's a link to it on the IRT website. So make sure you watch the general IRT info session in addition to these Inside IRT's admissions process webinars. Your application to get the application credentials, you have to fill out an inquiry form on the website. If you're here, you probably did that already and are getting the emails from IRT saying, hey, this webinar series is happening. You should join as you're putting your materials together. So I won't bore you with all of those details, but just a reminder that our application, in addition to the essays, requires a resume CV, copies of your unofficial transcripts to be uploaded directly to the application from all previous credit earning institutions, the essays, which we just discussed, and then 3 recommendations. Oh, we have to take out academic.
Yes, I just saw that too. I was like, wait, we're no longer doing the interview. So that's one less item that you have to worry about.
Yes.
So there's no longer virtual interview.
As of 2023, we have done away with the interview requirement. Mm-hmm. Okay. For more info, go to the website or reach out to the generic IRT email. You can also reach Leslie and I. I'm realizing that our information, we usually put our information here as well. So
Yes.
shame on us, 2
Yes.
strikes and you're out. But that is all we wrote for the formal.
I'll put them in the chat.
Oh, perfect. That's super helpful. Yeah. And we'll get our stuff together before next Wednesday. But okay, how do y'all feel now about these essays? Are you like full of more anxiety, less anxiety? Thumbs up, thumbs down for this was helpful, or in like you can, yeah, literally do perfect. Okay. Got it.
Good.
Cool. And we have some questions. Excellent. So we'll start with Noel. No?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. For the social science and arts applicants, I was having some difficulty distinguishing between question 3 and 4. Could you provide some distinctions between them from question 3 and 4, because they sound like they could have potentially the same answers, which they could have. But I would love to have some feedback on how to think of them and approach each question independently.
Yeah, so they could definitely be related. So let's say you're doing a research project now and you had anticipated that the results would be X, or that you would discover X, and what you have discovered is Y. And now that Y has led you to, think about what that why is your research for graduate school. So they could be related, or it could be that you've done some research, had some current research, and you've decided you're going to pivot away from that for whatever reason. And now what are you thinking about you will do in graduate school instead of that initial project?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing I can offer, and I don't think this is even different to what Leslie said, it's just my wording, right? Like just my phrasing for it is for essay 3, which I pulled up the website so we could see them at the same time. We could see essay 3 and essay 4 together, which obviously in the PowerPoint, we can only look at one at a time. We're asking you to articulate, like, in the field, what are the major pools of thought that you're pulling from or that are interesting to you? And so we're really asking you to talk about like existing scholarship, like what exists already within your discipline, and how are you drawing from those scholars or theories that are already popular or well-researched or well-known, and what methods are compelling to you. And then in essay 4, we're really asking you to be more specific and like actually identify, I'm interested in looking at this population in this context from this time period, using these questions to address these questions or to answer these questions. So number 3 is more asking you about like your current positionality or your previous positionality, which is why the 3A is asking you to discuss a current project. So essay 3 is like, right now, today, if we were to ask you what you're working on and what your areas of specialty are, what are they? And then essay 4 is, in your PhD program, what is the work you want to carry out? So what you're doing right now is maybe not what you hope to do in your PhD. I'm sure they could definitely be related. Most people do have a relationship between what they're currently working on and what they hope to work on. Usually what you're hoping to do in your PhD is like an iteration of or building directly from like your current work as a launching point. But that is like that's my articulation. When I read the essays, essay 3, when I'm reading, is like, what am I doing now, or what have I done recently that has like informed my scholarly perspective? And essay 4 is, in my PhD, I specifically want to interrogate these questions. Was that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Cheers. Okay, and we do have some more Hands raised. Is it Jean?
Yes. Hi. Can you all hear me all right?
Cheers.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yes.
And it is Jean. So thank you for this. I actually have a question that's similar to one I think that just popped up in the chat, but thinking about, so I wasn't here for the initial question in the chat, but I've been working for 2 years, so I've been out of school for a bit, and I was curious about how, like, where that can come up in the essays, or if it should at all, if it should be more talking about, research that I did while I was in school, and sort of the connection, but I'm curious where that should sort of go beyond, resume, CV kind of stuff.
Sure, this is a great question. And for the sake of the recording, I'll just read the question in the chat as well, since they are like fairly closely related, and then we can have that captured. So the question that came through the chat was, if you are not currently in undergrad and don't have a research background, but you want to apply to a master's PhD program in education, how likely are you to be seen as a competitive applicant? So I do think there is a distinction to how I would respond to this question if you're pursuing education versus if you're pursuing arts and sciences. Definitely a lack of formal research experience, and you've been out of school for a little while and you want to pursue a social science is more of a challenge than if you have a lack of research experience and you've been out of school for a while and you want to pursue a degree in education. When we were discussing the nuances between the arts and sciences essays and the education essays for the IRT application, I think it was me who spoke a little bit about education fields tend to be interested in your experience, your professional skills, the roles that you've held, the like students that you've worked with directly, like that sort of practical professional experience. And that tends to be the highlight of your application to education graduate programs. And then in arts and sciences and humanities and social sciences, it tends to be more about the scholarship, the knowledge production, the research, the literature, and they want to know what your experience and exposure is to methodologies in the field, scholars and theorists within your discipline, and your ability to produce knowledge. Cheers. So to answer your question more directly now, which was, well, like, how does that show up in the application? Definitely you can demonstrate this in your resume CV. So, highlighting the experiences you have that are most relevant. Maybe they're not necessarily the most recent, maybe they're not research heavy, but maybe you've been volunteering for a book club at your library, and through that experience you're engaging with the students that you hope to work with after you get your degree, and you're having conversations that are facilitating their identity development, and that's directly related to the stuff that you want to do in your graduate program and in your career and beyond. Like, okay, that should show up in your resume, and maybe it's also showing up in your essay questions around what were the most impactful experiences you've had recently, or talk about the work you've done that's relevant to your goals. So yes, I think I'm maybe getting away from the question a little bit. Leslie, do you have any thoughts on this that you really want to add?
Yes, I would say definitely apply to IRT, because don't take yourself out of a possible opportunity right
I see what you're
away.
saying. I see.
Apply to IRT, and there are 4 of us that read the applications. Am I correct? Yes, there are 4 of us that read the applications.
Yep.
And so oftentimes, we can make suggestions about fields, or, we're able to look at students' resumes and what they write, and give them a number of fields to think about where they possibly could do their work. Or, a lot of times we're doing things and we don't feel like it's anything important, but when we're looking at it, it was like, yes, that's very relevant, very important. You need to articulate that. You need to tell more about that you were directing this program, and that you were working with these young people, and that you created a component of of wellness and mental health, because you noticed after the pandemic that students were suffering, you know, you, you want to share that information, and we can help you, you know, to amplify upon what you've already done. And if it's not a fit, we'll let you know that as well. And we'll let you know what you may need to work on to reapply and
Mhm.
be successful in applying with us if it comes to that.
Which just made me think the only thing I think we haven't said yet is you still have a year and a half until you'll be entering your graduate program from right
Mhm.
now, right? Like from
Mhm.
today,
Yes.
Wednesday, January 25th. You know, the goal will be that you start your graduate program in September of 2024. So if there are gaps in
Yes.
your application, what IRT recommends when it comes time to like actually submitting your graduate school applications is to address or name those gaps unapologetically,
Mhm.
but with a discussion of how you intend to close them.
Yes.
So if you're applying to a field in education and maybe you never took an education class and maybe your major was biology and you know that didn't really work out for you so hot and so now you're like, oh, I want to teach elementary school, but you've never taken any education courses, talk about how you're going to seek some experience or, you know, intentionally expose yourself to scholarship within the field of pedagogy and teacher training and classroom management and education. So you don't necessarily have to already possess all of the skills and experiences that will make you a qualified graduate school applicant at the time you submit your IRT application. So if there are gaps that you're worried about, whether it's research-based or professional experience-based, name that. I don't have XYZ skill, but this is how I intend to gain some of that over the next year.
Mhm. Yeah. For education, one of the areas that we see often is like for students who may have majored in American Studies, and now they want to do history, or they've majored in history, but they've had every kind of history. They've
Mm.
had like African history, they've had Asian history, but they have not had, say, American government and history, American history 1 and 2. So
Mhm.
if you were a junior and I were talking with you, I would say, okay, I'm looking at your transcript and I noticed that you have all of this, you know, history background, but what I don't see is an American government class and the 2 American history classes. So then you could pivot, and hopefully you can get those in over the summer or during your senior year, so that when you actually apply to the Masters of Arts in Teaching of History, you've got the coursework, because they're going to be looking, history, MAT history programs look for those 3 classes and then any additional history classes. So we can often tell you that about whatever field that you may be looking at. There are definitely fields like psychology and sociology. They want you to have an undergraduate degree in those prior to moving on to the master's and the PhD.
Okay.
But then there are some other fields where you don't necessarily have to have that background. So say higher education, for example, you can have an undergraduate degree in any field and go into higher education, master's level, that is, because now you want to work in a multicultural office, or you want to work for admissions, or Res Life, for example.
Totally. Cool. All right, we have another question, Cameron.
Yes, hi. I had a question about essay 4 of the education essays.
Yep.
So should we aim to write that essay as like a cohesive 450-word essay where it ties in all 3 citations, or could it be like 3 separate paragraphs that describes like one citation independent?
Great question. I think it's even structured in the application that you would write 3 separate citations. So if you haven't looked at that section on the IRT application yet, you would know this, obviously. But from my memory, is someone telling me that's not it in the chat? Oh, no, okay. I thought someone was putting in the chat, Brittany, that's wrong. I'm looking at the application right now, and it's not 3 separate sections. So I might have been putting my foot in my mouth, but I do think that it is structured in a way that lends it to like 3 individual citations. That is all we're expecting.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
not
So
convinced
Leslie's
of
the
that.
one telling me I'm wrong. That's fine.
But only because you're held to 150 words. And I think it's just a box, but we're looking for three
So-
different, because you're also going to cite them. So you're going to write the author's name and the name of the text, and if it, the year was published and that kind of thing. And they can be related or not related, or somewhat related.
So the short answer is no, that does not have to be one cohesive essay that outlines all 3 together. It could be, it's not required. And what we're really looking for is that each citation is itself succinct, clear, comprehensive, right? Like a good summary of the text, and that you stay within the word limit for each individual description.
Okay, that really helps. Thank you very much.
Totally. Excellent. Yes, our next question, and please do me the honor of telling me how to pronounce your name.
Oh, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Akit Sali. It is quite tricky.
Akit Sali? I just wanted
Yes,
to.
Akit
Okay,
Sali. That's perfect. Yes. I had a very similar question, but about the arts and social sciences essay. So it's also the essay number 1 is within that same format, and it's just a box, and then it's the 3 citations. So it would be just to clarify that it's similar to like that same format of the 3 citations, or it could be a cohesive essay.
Totally, yes. So we're getting confirmation that it's 1 text box is what you're saying for essay 1.
Yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, or like for keeping me in check on that regard. So it's not 3 separate text boxes, it's 1 text box for the bibliography question. Same answer. Yes, you're exactly correct. The expectation is not that it has to be a synthesized 450 word essay for all through the discussion of all 3. They can be 3 short individual 150 word essays that just describe each individual text. But certainly if you want to show off your ability to synthesize and write it as 1 cohesive essay, that wouldn't hurt you. Like, it wouldn't take points away, but that's not the expectation.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Did we get did we miss any questions? No? Okay,
No, I think we're,
great.
so we'll say
Final
going
thought.
once,
Yeah.
going twice. We do want to plug the next session
Mhm.
is
Wednesday the 1st. Oh my gosh, is it the 1st next week? On Wednesday? I need to pull up a calendar.
let me
Dang, it is. It's going to be Black History Month next Wednesday, and we will be doing webinar 3. Inside IRT's admissions process, and looking at recommendations.
And in the interim, if you have questions, if you're in the application and you have something comes up, email us. We put them in the chat. So don't hesitate.
I did see just one question in the chat, just to confirm that these webinars will be posted to YouTube.
Yes.
Correct. So tonight, as soon as we end this recording, I'll start converting it and then start uploading it to YouTube. So our goal is within 24 hours of the live stream, we get it online. Doesn't always happen exactly within 24 hours, but within, I'd say, like 48 for sure.
So you can go back.
Excellent. Y'all are wonderful.
Yeah.
Flattery gets you everywhere. You're welcome. Cool. Well, thank you for your thoughtfulness and your attentiveness, and we'll see you all next week, or maybe most of you or some of you, or at least your applications in a couple months.
Definitely.
All
Be
right.
well. Take care.
Good night, team.
Bye all.